millionaire husband abandoned his sick wife for a mistress, but her revenge left him with nothing. Picture a gilded penthouse overlooking the sparkling skyline of New York City, a sanctuary of wealth, prestige, and promise, yet haunted by secrets and shattered vows. This is the world of Richard Kensington, a self-made millionaire, and his devoted wife, Emily, a woman whose unwavering love was matched only by her resilience in the face of grave illness. When rumors of a hidden affair swirl through the halls of power, trust unravels, exposing the cruel betrayal that would tear them apart. A mistress enters the scene, entangling their fates in a story of heartache and vengeance. Stay with us to discover how Emily's remarkable revenge shakes the foundations of fortune and leaves everyone forever changed. Richard Kensington was born in the humble suburbs of Buffalo, New York, far from the glamorous epicenter of Manhattan's elite circles. His parents, Ronald and Martha Kensington, were middle-class folks who believed in hard work and perseverance. As a teenager, Richard worked tirelessly, mowing lawns, delivering newspapers, anything to save up for a future that stretched far beyond the picket fences he knew. His greatest drive was a yearning to surpass his modest upbringing, to prove that he had the brilliance and grit to make it in the big city. He met Emily Carter during his final year of college at Columbia University. Emily was a theater major with big dreams of making it to Broadway. Quiet yet passionate, Emily instantly captivated Richard with her fierce determination and gentle spirit. Though their backgrounds were vastly different, Emily's father was a retired professor, and her mother a librarian. She carried herself with an elegant confidence that set her apart. Their first date was at a cozy Italian bistro near campus, Mamma Lucia's. They stayed long after closing, sharing stories about their lives, ambitions, and insecurities. Richard realized that for the first time, someone saw him for who he was, not just who he wanted to be. Emily recognized a raw intensity in him, a yearning for success, but also a tender side he rarely displayed. As years passed, Richard's eye for opportunities in the tech sector sharpened. He founded Kensington Innovations, a startup that developed specialized software for retail companies. Although the first few years were rocky, a fateful partnership with a major clothing brand catapulted the company into staggering success. By the time Richard was 30, he was a millionaire, buying penthouses, driving Bentleys, and stepping into a world previously only accessible to Manhattan's old money families. Emily, in turn, stood by his side through every high-stakes meeting, each victorious client pitch, and the countless nights where he paced their living room, phone glued to his ear, negotiating his next business move. Their wedding was a grand yet elegant affair. Held at the Plaza Hotel in New York City, it dazzled 200 guests, including major players in tech, theater, and academia. Everyone commented on how Emily and Richard seemed to form the perfect couple: beauty, brains, and boundless ambition. But success came at a price. Richard's schedule quickly became consumed by clients, investors, and expansions. As Kensington Innovations grew, so did his appetite for luxury and the intoxicating thrill of high-stakes business deals. Emily's love for the theater faded into the background as she found herself consumed by philanthropic events and charity galas, duties that were expected of a millionaire's wife. In the early years of their marriage, Emily often whispered assurances, "Money will never replace what we have." Richard would smile, profess his love, and promise her a life so grand that no shadows of the past could ever taint it. Yet, beneath the glittering veneer of wealth, their emotional distance began to expand. Their love remained, but it was tested by late nights, neglected dinners, and quiet sighs of resignation. Neither suspected that the real test of their devotion was still to come, an ordeal that would reshape their lives and set into motion a betrayal and revenge that not even the biggest Broadway playwright could have scripted. It was during one of Richard's frequent business trips, this time to San Francisco for a tech conference, that Emily first sensed something was wrong with her body. She had been feeling unusually fatigued, with a persistent cough that worsened every day. Initially, she chalked it up to stress. After all, she was juggling charitable events, social commitments, and the silent pressure of being Mrs. Kensington, the perfect hostess and partner to a millionaire CEO. One rainy afternoon, after nearly fainting at a fundraiser, Emily's friend and personal assistant, Rachel Donnelly, insisted she see a doctor. Emily reluctantly agreed. They visited a private clinic in the Upper East Side, where Dr. Serena Holmes ran a series of tests. Several anxious days later, Emily received a call asking her to come in for a consultation. She went alone, dismissing Rachel's offer to accompany her, confident that it would be something minor. Instead, she walked out with a diagnosis that sent a chill through her entire being, a rare autoimmune disorder that would require ongoing treatment, medication, and close monitoring. The doctor informed her that while the condition was manageable, it would be a long, draining journey. Stress and exhaustion could worsen the symptoms, making it even more crucial for Emily to prioritize rest and medical care. Stunned and overwhelmed, Emily told Rachel the truth, but decided to keep it hidden from Richard, at least until she fully understood the implications. She rationalized it. Richard was in the midst of finalizing a monumental merger for Kensington Innovations, one that could launch their fortunes to stratospheric heights. Emily didn't want to burden him. She didn't want to add to his stress. However, her physical condition started to decline faster than she expected. She struggled to keep up her usual pace, the late-night galas, the carefully orchestrated brunches with investors' wives, and the community outreach programs at local theaters. Dark circles formed under her eyes, and her once vibrant spirit dimmed. When Richard finally returned from the West Coast, he was too preoccupied to notice. He was ecstatic about a major breakthrough in negotiations. Rather than pausing to see her fragile state, he talked endlessly about the deal, the profits, and the lavish vacation they might take afterward. Emily tried to speak to him about her health, but every time she mentioned feeling unwell, he brushed it off with well-intentioned yet dismissive responses. "Maybe you need more vitamins," or "I'll have my secretary book you a spa day." A few weeks later, Emily mustered the courage to try again. This time she arranged a quiet dinner at home, hoping to find the right moment to explain her situation in detail. But Richard arrived late, eyes glued to his phone, muttering apologies between calls. After another round of messages from an unnamed contact who seemed extremely insistent, he abruptly excused himself and left for an emergency meeting. Emily was left alone at the dinner table, the untouched meal growing cold before her. She clutched at her chest, a wave of dizziness overtaking her. In that moment, she realized just how isolated she had become in her own marriage. The unspoken truths and the secrets they were keeping from each other would soon prove far more corrosive than the disease that threatened her body. Still, Emily held hope that once she found the right moment to tell Richard, he would stand by her. After all, their love had weathered countless storms. She just never imagined the next tempest would strike so close to her heart, and that before she could reveal her truth, another, darker secret would arrive to shatter everything she believed in. Emily's household staff began to notice the changes in her demeanor and energy. Francine, the family's longtime housekeeper, observed how Emily would sometimes forget simple things, like the date of a luncheon or the location of an event. Other times, Emily would retreat to her bedroom for hours, missing calls and visitors. Concerned, Francine gently suggested scheduling another appointment with Dr. Holmes, but Emily brushed it off with a polite smile, promising she would handle it when the time was right. Meanwhile, Richard's behavior became more erratic. He was glued to his phone at odd hours, often stepping out of the apartment to take calls in the hallway, his voice hushed but urgent. Emily overheard snippets. "Yes, we'll meet soon. I promise. Not much longer." When she questioned him about it, he dismissed her concerns, attributing it all to the complexities of the merger. But Emily could feel the subtle shift in the air, a distance that couldn't solely be explained by business. One evening, as Emily waited for Richard to return from the office, she noticed an unfamiliar perfume lingering in the living room. It was floral, sweet, and definitely not hers. She checked the coffee table and found a smudged lipstick mark on a glass of water. It was as though another presence had invaded her sanctuary without her knowledge. When she confronted Richard about it, he shrugged casually. "Oh, that was probably a client I had to bring up for a quick chat. You know how it is in this business." His nonchalance didn't sit well with Emily. Something didn't feel right. She tried to push it out of her mind, hoping it was just a misunderstanding. Yet the doubts only grew. Rachel, who was also close with Richard, confessed to Emily that she had seen him stepping into a black limousine with a striking brunette outside a high-end restaurant in Soho. Confusion and fear waged a war inside Emily. She wanted to believe that the man she married would never cheat on her, especially not while she was struggling with her health. But evidence to the contrary seemed to appear daily. Torn between the pressure of her illness and her suspicions, Emily decided to confide in her older brother, Daniel Carter. Daniel, a quiet university librarian in Boston, was fiercely protective of his sister. He listened calmly as Emily poured out her doubts and fears. He pressed her to address her health first, but Emily insisted she had to clear the smoke around Richard's possible affair. She couldn't bring herself to believe she was losing both her health and her marriage in the same breath. Determined to uncover the truth, Emily hired a private investigator named Howard Blake. Recommended by a trusted friend, Howard was known for his discretion and professionalism. He assured Emily that he would work swiftly and quietly. Her heart pounded as she handed him photographs of Richard, details of his daily schedule, and addresses of places he frequented. As days bled into nights, Emily tried to maintain her usual composure, attending events, smiling for cameras, and shaking hands with investors' wives. But behind the poised facade, her mind raced with anxious thoughts. Who was the mysterious brunette? Was her marriage a lie? And how would Richard react if he discovered she had been digging into his private life? In the midst of it all, Emily's health worsened. She clung to secrecy about her diagnosis, refusing to admit vulnerability to a husband she was starting to doubt. This denial of her reality would soon collide with the truth in a way that would change everything, setting in motion a series of betrayals and revelations neither of them could ever reverse. 2 weeks of agonizing waiting came to a head when Howard Blake finally called Emily. His tone was grim, revealing that he had uncovered evidence of Richard meeting a young socialite named Ava Covington at various upscale venues across Manhattan. The photographs were damning. Richard and Ava laughing intimately at the Ritz-Carlton bar, strolling hand in hand through Central Park, and even entering a luxury apartment building in Tribeca late at night. Emily's heart sank as she flipped through each snapshot. It was like watching her life shatter in real time. In one particularly painful photo, Richard had his arm around Ava's waist, his face lit with an adoring smile Emily hadn't seen in months. Proof of infidelity now lay in her trembling hands. Who was Ava Covington? Howard explained that she was an up-and-coming fashion influencer, known for her glamorous Instagram feed and connections to prominent designers. She had grown up in a privileged environment, attending exclusive schools and rubbing shoulders with Manhattan's elite. Perfectly poised and impeccably dressed, Ava seemed a world away from the compassionate, genuine nature that defined Emily. Determined to confront the situation, Emily invited Richard to a quiet dinner at home yet again. She laid out their finest china, hoping the domestic warmth might remind him of the life they'd built together. When he arrived, he seemed preoccupied, tapping away at his phone until Emily politely asked him to put it down. With trembling hands, she slid the photographs across the table, watching for the slightest flicker of regret or guilt in his eyes. Richard stared at the images, his face contorting through a spectrum of emotions, shock, anger, and ultimately a steely resolve. "It's not what it looks like," he insisted. But his words rang hollow. The evidence was irrefutable. Rage and heartbreak warred within Emily. She had expected tears, apologies, or some remorse. Instead, Richard bristled, as though her discovery was an annoyance rather than a betrayal. He didn't deny the affair outright. Instead, he tried to justify it, deflecting blame onto Emily for being distant and too consumed with her own issues. The cruelty of the accusation left her reeling. The man who once claimed he'd do anything for her was now using her illness, an illness he didn't even know about yet, as a scapegoat for his infidelity. When the argument escalated, with Richard calling Emily overly sensitive, she felt her resolve harden. She demanded that Richard end whatever was going on with Ava. Through clenched teeth, he swore that Ava was just a business connection-turned-friend, but the damage was done. That night, Richard slept in the guest bedroom, and neither uttered a word to the other. In the days that followed, tension smothered every corner of their penthouse. Emily received messages of concern from close friends. She suspected rumors about Richard's mistress had begun circulating among their social circles. She contemplated telling him about her diagnosis, hoping it might rouse whatever empathy remained in him. But each time she opened her mouth, his dismissive glare stopped her in her tracks. Richard's betrayal shook Emily to the core, fracturing the trust she had believed to be unbreakable. Little did she know that this was only the beginning. Ava's presence would soon intensify, driving a wedge so deep that the entire foundation of Emily's world would be left on the brink of collapse. And in that collapsing world, Emily would discover a well of strength she never knew she possessed, one that would set the stage for a revenge so thorough it would leave Richard with nothing. In the weeks following the revelation of Richard's affair, Emily noticed he no longer attempted to hide his phone calls or late-night outings. It was as though once his secret was out, he decided to flaunt it. The penthouse that once felt like a warm cocoon of shared dreams now felt like a claustrophobic cage, rattling with the echoes of heartbreak. Emily's health deteriorated further under the weight of stress. The cough she had once brushed off now came in fits, leaving her breathless. Headaches became constant, a dull throb that resonated behind her eyes. She tried to rest, but sleep only brought nightmares of Richard and Ava parading their love in front of the world. Every morning she woke with tears drying on her cheeks. Tristan Norton, an old friend from her theatre days, re-entered her life around this time. Once upon a time, Tristan had harbored a quiet admiration for Emily, but their paths diverged when she married Richard. Now he was a struggling stage director looking for a new production sponsor. Concerned for Emily's well-being, he reached out to her on social media after hearing rumors about her troubled marriage. She felt oddly relieved by his sudden reappearance, grateful to have someone who remembered her beyond the role of Mrs. Kensington. In discreet coffee shop conversations, she admitted the truth of her sickness and the betrayal she was enduring. Tristan listened intently, his eyes reflecting sorrow and empathy, qualities that felt increasingly rare in her life. Though Emily had never been one to confide deeply in others, she found comfort in his quiet support. He was the one person who didn't expect anything from her, no social facade, no philanthropic obligations, no financial strings. Meanwhile, Richard sank deeper into his relationship with Ava. Their affair became more public, sightings in glamorous hotspots like Cipriani and private parties in the Hamptons. Paparazzi captured them dancing in clubs, laughing in front-row seats at fashion shows. Emily felt a mixture of humiliation and fury each time she scrolled through online gossip sites. Everyone seemed to be whispering about her husband's new arm candy, painting Emily as the neglected wife who had failed to keep his interest. Friends close to Richard tried to intervene, reminding him of the risks to his reputation if he abandoned his wife so openly. Still, he dismissed them. In his mind, he had worked too hard to reach this level of success. He was unstoppable now, and if he chose to indulge in extramarital affairs, it was simply another entitlement he believed came with wealth and power. As for Emily, her fragility was, in his eyes, a liability, one he could sidestep by focusing on Ava, who was vivacious and carefree. At home, their arguments grew vicious. Emily would plead with him, not for herself, but for the dignity of their marriage. Richard turned cold, accusing her of being a burden he never asked for, launching stinging barbs about her lack of energy and presence. His cruelty left her shell-shocked, wondering how the man she once adored had become so callous, so immune to her pain. But she also felt something else stirring deep within her, a refusal to break. Her heart might have been wounded, and her body might have been failing her, but Emily Carter Kensington was no weakling. She had always been the supportive partner, the giving wife. Now, faced with betrayal and abandonment, the fire inside her began to roar. Step by step, she would find a way to reclaim her life, even if it meant bringing down the empire she had helped Richard build. As the affair escalated, so did Emily's medical condition. Episodes of fatigue worsened, and she frequently found herself bedridden for days at a time. Her phone would ring with concerned calls from Rachel and Tristan, but rarely from Richard. He had all but moved out of their bedroom, coming and going at odd hours without explanation. One particularly brutal evening, Emily mustered the courage to confront Richard with the total truth. Her brother Daniel had driven down from Boston after receiving frantic text messages from Rachel about Emily's worsening health. Together, they waited in the living room for Richard to come home. Hours passed. It was nearly midnight when Richard finally walked in, reeking of expensive cologne and top-shelf whiskey. Daniel stood, glaring. "Richard, we need to talk," he said, his voice tight with emotion. Emily, cheeks flushed with fever, pressed a glass of water to her lips, trying to steady her nerves. She was prepared to tell him everything, her diagnosis, the medication she was on, the possibility she might need a risky treatment if her condition continued to deteriorate. But Richard, in no mood for serious discussions, merely scoffed. "Not tonight," he said curtly, tossing his suit jacket over a chair. His gaze flickered contemptuously toward Daniel. "And I don't appreciate being ambushed by your family, Emily." Summoning her remaining strength, Emily rose on shaky legs and grabbed his arm. "You will listen to me," she said, her voice laced with quiet desperation. She told him about the hospital visits, the test results, and the excruciating fear she had been living with for months. "I'm sick, Richard," she finished, tears glistening. "I need your support." For a moment, Richard seemed to soften. A flicker of concern flashed across his face, but almost instantly he hardened once more, pulling away. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he asked. Before she could answer, he glowered at her. "You think I can just drop everything for this? I have a company to run, an empire that you've enjoyed the spoils of." Daniel erupted, fists clenched, calling Richard a selfish coward. The argument erupted into a shouting match. Emily's hands trembled so violently she could barely keep hold of the glass. The emotional and physical strain overwhelmed her. She sank to her knees, gasping for breath, tears spilling down her cheeks. In that moment, Richard made a choice that would haunt him forever. Instead of comforting her, he turned on his heel. "I can't handle this right now," he growled, marching to the door. With one last withering glance, he spat out, "Stay out of my way," and left the penthouse. The door slammed behind him, echoing through the marble floors. Emily collapsed into Daniel's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. She realized the love she once cherished was irreparably broken. All illusions crumbled. Her husband, a man she had built her life around, had just walked out while she was on the verge of a medical crisis. Later that night, she stared at the ceiling, tears drying against her pillow. Fear and anger warred within her, a swirling cauldron of emotions that refused to quiet. Never had she felt more helpless or more determined. Betrayed and abandoned, Emily made a promise to herself. She would survive this, and she would make sure Richard Kensington paid for every tear he had caused her to shed. The following morning, Emily woke to Daniel gently checking her pulse and temperature. Concern was etched on his face. "Em, you can't do this alone," he whispered, urging her to let him help in any way he could. Over a simple breakfast, Daniel and Rachel persuaded Emily to prioritize her health. After all, what good was revenge or anything else if she wasn't alive to see it through? Resigned to their insistence, Emily agreed to a more comprehensive treatment plan. Dr. Serena Holmes scheduled a series of medical interventions, including immune-boosting therapies that required regular visits to Mount Sinai Hospital. For the first time in months, Emily allowed others to care for her. She placed her trust in Daniel, Rachel, and Tristan, grateful for the unwavering support she had so desperately lacked from Richard. During one of her hospital appointments, Tristan accompanied her. He watched quietly as nurses administered IV drips, each lasting hours. When Emily dozed off, he stepped into the hallway to take a call and bumped into an old acquaintance, Amelia Wallace, a prominent entertainment lawyer. Hearing about Emily's plight sparked Amelia's innate desire to help. She offered her legal expertise, especially if Emily ever needed counsel regarding her marriage or financial matters. For Emily, the mere mention of legal intervention felt ominous. She still clung to a thread of hope that Richard might come to his senses. But Tristan and Amelia gently reminded her that the best approach was to protect herself. If Richard was too consumed by his new fling and his empire, Emily needed to ensure she wasn't left destitute or powerless. So began a quiet yet determined effort to assemble a safety net. Emily called upon a discreet financial advisor, Gregory Lang, to review the prenuptial agreement she had signed with Richard. Years ago, love-struck and optimistic, she had barely glanced at its contents. Now she discovered provisions that favored Richard heavily, granting her only a minimal settlement if the marriage dissolved under certain circumstances, including infidelity. Ironically, the document had a morality clause that might work in her favor if she could prove Richard's affair had directly compromised their union. It was a glimmer of opportunity. With guidance from Amelia, Emily started collecting evidence, bank statements, property titles, and any trace of Richard's assets that her name might be attached to. She was meticulous, taking care not to alert Richard. During one heartbreaking moment, she found a hotel receipt in Richard's desk drawer, dated just a week before she confronted him with the photos. Ava's name was on the booking. The blatant disregard for their marriage nearly gutted her, but it also fueled her resolve. Though Emily tried to remain calm and focused on her health, the emotional toll was severe. Panic attacks struck late at night, leaving her breathless with terror, imagining a future alone and unprotected. Daniel would rush to her side, reminding her of her strength, reassuring her she had people fighting for her. She gripped his hand, tears staining her pillow, knowing she couldn't turn back. Richard's betrayal had led them here, and she was done being the passive victim. Despite her pain, each day Emily discovered a renewed sense of purpose. Where once she had been content to play the supportive spouse, she now realized her own life hung in the balance. Her convalescence allowed her time for introspection, time to remember the dreams she'd shelved, the talents she'd let stagnate in the shadows of Richard's success. And with each passing moment, as the IV drip delivered healing medicine into her veins, Emily's resolve solidified. She would reclaim her power and her dignity no matter what it took. While Emily focused on her medical treatments and discreetly compiling evidence, Richard and Ava continued to flaunt their relationship throughout Manhattan's social scene. Photos of them appeared in tabloids, attending art gallery openings, dining at 3-star Michelin restaurants, even vacationing on a private yacht off the coast of the Bahamas. The gossip columns whispered about the scorned wife, painting Emily as pathetic and outdated, a relic of Richard's past. Beneath the public humiliation, Emily felt a new energy coursing through her, spurred by a mixture of anger, heartbreak, and a fierce drive to protect herself. She met regularly with Amelia Wallace in the back room of a quaint French café on the Upper West Side. Together, they pored over every clause in the prenuptial agreement, analyzing how best to demonstrate Richard's breach of marital duties. At the same time, Tristan Norton urged Emily to rekindle her passion for the stage. He believed that rediscovering her talents would provide an emotional outlet and remind her of the vibrant woman she once was. Tentatively, Emily agreed to audition for a small production Tristan was directing, a modern adaptation of a classic drama. The audition was raw, her voice trembled with nerves, and she had to pause for coughing fits. But as she read the lines, she felt alive again. Eager to keep her momentum going, Emily threw herself into the dual tasks of preparing for the role and orchestrating her legal strategy. The hidden reserves of strength she tapped into surprised even her. Gone was the demure, smiling society wife. In her place stood a woman ready to challenge the status quo. Rachel, thrilled to see her friend regaining confidence, assisted in every capacity, fetching scripts, scheduling rehearsals around Emily's hospital visits, and continuing to gather intel on Richard's business dealings. Then came a breakthrough. Amelia discovered that Richard, in his haste to impress investors, had overlooked a critical clause in a major contract. Kensington Innovations was teetering on the edge of violating a non-disclosure agreement with a key client. If that client pulled out or sued, it could set off a cascade of financial disasters. Amelia, with her legal acumen, saw an opening. If Emily made a timely, strategic move, she could leverage her knowledge of this precarious situation against Richard. But they needed proof, actual documentation linking Richard's negligence to potential fallout. Emily and Rachel devised a plan to obtain the necessary files from Richard's home office. The tension was palpable when Emily, feigning a desire to reconcile, invited Richard for a private conversation at the penthouse. Under the guise of wanting to discuss finances for an upcoming charity gala, she managed to distract him long enough for Rachel to slip into his study and copy relevant documents. The moral weight of betrayal pressed on Emily's conscience. She wasn't naturally deceitful, and the idea of sneaking behind Richard's back made her stomach churn. But every time she hesitated, she reminded herself of all his lies, of how he left her on the floor in tears while he rushed back to Ava. That memory fortified her resolve. So the seeds of revenge were sown, each one nourished by heartbreak, anger, and a fierce protective instinct. Her illness, once a crippling disadvantage, became an unexpected source of focus, an urgency that pushed her to act decisively. While Richard believed he had escaped the confines of a sick wife to indulge in his hedonistic new life, Emily was quietly assembling a plan that would leave him reeling. Soon, the stage would be set for the final act of their twisted drama. Emily's gradual return to the theatre and her clandestine legal maneuvers ran parallel to the unraveling of Richard's public image. The first blow to his carefully cultivated reputation came at a high-profile tech conference in Dubai. Kensington Innovations was supposed to unveil a groundbreaking software update, but rumors circulated that a critical component was behind schedule due to mismanagement. Investors grew anxious, and several major clients began to question Richard's leadership. It didn't help that tabloids plastered images of him partying with Ava on a yacht while the company's major project stalled. For the first time in years, whispers about Richard's incompetence and reckless lifestyle overshadowed the once-praised brilliance that had fueled his meteoric rise. Meanwhile, Emily's theatrical comeback, though modest, reignited a sense of purpose within her. Tristan's production was a small avant-garde show in an off-Broadway venue, but it garnered attention for its raw emotional depth. Critics applauded Emily's performance, praising the authenticity she brought to a role laden with betrayal and heartbreak, emotions she didn't have to dig too deep to channel. One evening after a performance, as Emily stepped into the theatre's lobby, she locked eyes with Richard, who had shown up unexpectedly. It was a jarring moment. His face revealed turmoil, possibly regret. Ava was not by his side. He stood awkwardly by the doorway, a bouquet of white lilies in his hand. The entire cast and crew watched in stunned silence as the estranged couple approached each other. "Impressive performance," Richard remarked, his voice brittle. He extended the flowers, an odd gesture of atonement. Emily hesitated before accepting them, her expression unreadable. After an excruciating pause, she led him to a quiet corner. "What do you want, Richard?" she asked, struggling to keep her composure. The rush of adrenaline from the stage still coursed through her veins, making her voice tremble ever so slightly. He inhaled, eyes darting around as though searching for the right words. He apologized, haltingly, awkwardly, acknowledging that he'd abandoned her when she was ill. He claimed he missed her, that Ava was just a phase, and he wanted a chance to make things right. But Emily wasn't the same woman he once manipulated with grand gestures. Pain had been a stark teacher. She peered at him, noticing the faint lines of stress aging his once youthful face. "I'm not sure what to say," she began softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't deny the spark of love that lingered in the corners of her heart, but the chasm of betrayal was too vast. Just then, Tristan approached to check on Emily. Richard's face twisted with jealousy, eyes narrowing at the gentle hand Tristan placed on her shoulder. Sensing trouble, Tristan backed off. Richard's immediate suspicion only cemented Emily's belief that he hadn't truly changed. He was still driven by possessiveness and pride. Over the next few days, Richard tried to contact her repeatedly, texts, calls, even showing up at her apartment unannounced. Emily, torn between the desire to believe in the man she once loved and the reality of his betrayal, maintained a careful distance. The budding rumors about Kensington Innovations' financial and legal vulnerabilities gave her reason to hold firm. She wanted to see how low Richard might sink before he realized the full consequence of his actions. Despite her guarded stance, each apology from Richard tugged at her heart, threatening to soften her resolve. But then she would recall the nights of solitude in a cavernous penthouse, the tears shed in hospital beds with no husband by her side, and the tabloid pictures of him laughing with Ava. Those memories kept her focus sharp. She had come too far to let her guard down now. The real reckoning was just on the horizon, and it would be unlike anything Richard or Ava had ever imagined. As Kensington Innovations' troubles mounted, Emily's strategic plan moved toward a calculated climax. She had in her possession enough documentation to prove that Richard had breached confidentiality agreements, misused company funds to impress Ava, and neglected key responsibilities in pursuit of personal indulgences. Under Amelia Wallace's guidance, Emily quietly handed over select pieces of evidence to a reputable journalist, Ethan Farrow, at the New York Times. Ethan, known for his fearless investigative reporting, wasted no time verifying Emily's claims. The ensuing article was explosive, detailing how Richard Kensington, once hailed as a visionary tech magnate, was on the verge of losing major contracts due to internal chaos and scandalous misuse of company assets. The piece also hinted at his personal indiscretions, carefully naming no names but leaving enough breadcrumbs for readers to infer his involvement with a high-profile socialite. The fallout was immediate. Stocks of Kensington Innovations plummeted, and investors clamored for an emergency board meeting. Sponsors and partners began to distance themselves, wary of becoming entangled in the growing storm. Publicly, Richard tried to spin the narrative as a smear campaign orchestrated by competitors, but behind the scenes he was panicked. He even reached out to Emily, demanding to know if she had any part in the leak. Emily met him for coffee at a quiet cafe near Lincoln Center, calmly sipping her tea while he ranted and raved about dishonorable tactics. She felt a pang of sorrow, watching him unravel, remembering the ambitious young man she once admired. Yet she remained outwardly composed. "Is this what it's come to?" he asked bitterly. "You trying to ruin me with rumors and lies?" She set her cup down gently. "They're not rumors if they're true," she replied, meeting his gaze with steady resolve. "And you ruined us long before this." Richard's face hardened. He looked as though he might lunge across the table, but then reeled himself in. He tried a different tactic. He spoke of their history, the memories they shared, how they had built their empire together. But Emily refused to yield. The moment ended with him storming out, leaving behind a half-empty cup of coffee and a lifetime's worth of resentment. Back at her new apartment, she had quietly moved out of the penthouse to protect her privacy. Emily received a text from Ava. The mistress had somehow procured Emily's number, and she sent a barrage of messages laced with venomous accusations. Ava claimed that Emily was pathetic for clinging to a man who obviously no longer loved her. She threatened to reveal private information about Emily's health if Emily didn't stop slandering Richard. But Ava's threats fell flat. Emily had already gone public about her condition in a heartfelt interview, hoping to raise awareness for her rare autoimmune disorder. Ava had no ammunition there. All the chess pieces were in motion now. Richard battling a professional crisis, Ava scrambling to maintain her new high society status, and Emily quietly orchestrating moves from the shadows. Though physically exhausted and still battling her illness, Emily felt an odd sense of relief. The storm had arrived, and with it came the power to reclaim her identity, free from the shackles of Richard's empire. As the dust of this public scandal settled, the stage was set for the final showdown. Emily and her loyal allies watched from the wings, prepared for the next act in a drama that would end with Richard Kensington discovering that sometimes the real power lies not in wealth or status, but in the unbreakable spirit of a woman he once took for granted. The boardroom at Kensington Innovations was packed with anxious shareholders, legal advisors, and senior management. Rumors buzzed in the corridors. Richard might step down as CEO, a new majority stakeholder might swoop in, or the entire company could face a hostile takeover. Tensions rippled like electric currents in the sterile air. At the head of the table sat Richard, flanked by a beleaguered legal team. Though he tried to project confidence, the dark circles under his eyes betrayed his weariness. The meeting commenced with a barrage of accusations about fiscal impropriety, misallocation of funds, and the damaging tabloid stories that threatened the company's credibility. One by one, investors demanded explanations for Richard's conduct, both in and out of the office. In a desperate move, Richard attempted to shift blame onto his CFO, claiming he had been unaware of financial mismanagement. But the documentation Emily had quietly supplied to select board members made it clear that Richard had personally authorized extravagant expenditures under the guise of client entertainment. In reality, these funds had supported his lavish trips and gifts for Ava. As the accusations mounted, the CFO, cornered and disgraced, revealed emails that further implicated Richard. Emails in which Richard openly bragged about using company money to fund a well-deserved break for him and Ava in the Caribbean. A stunned silence washed over the boardroom before erupting into chaos as the furious board members demanded Richard's immediate resignation. Outside, journalists gathered in the lobby, cameras and microphones poised to capture the fallout. The security team tried to keep order, but the clamor was deafening. When the meeting ended, Richard emerged, head bowed, no triumphant grin on his face. He ignored the reporters' shouted questions, rushing to a waiting car. But paparazzi snapped pictures, capturing the moment of defeat for all to see. Meanwhile, Emily was ensconced in the supportive embrace of Daniel, Tristan and Rachel in her new apartment. She watched the live coverage on television. Her heart ached. Not from regret, but from the bittersweet sting of knowing she had wielded the sword that felled her husband's empire. She remembered the days when they were young and hungry, plotting their shared success at a small kitchen table. She grieved the future they had once planned, but she also acknowledged the necessity of this outcome. Later that evening, a representative from the board reached out to Emily, confirming Richard's suspension as CEO. Amelia Wallace, by Emily's side, took the call. She politely inquired about the prenuptial agreement and Emily's potential settlement options, calmly reminding them of Richard's many breaches, both financial and moral. The board representative, in a tone markedly more conciliatory than before, hinted that a favorable settlement would be arranged to keep Emily from pursuing a lengthy legal battle that might further harm the company's reputation. The news spread quickly. Ava, hoping to salvage her own name, distanced herself from Richard publicly. She posted a tearful apology on social media, claiming she had been misled and used. The crowd's sympathy was lukewarm at best. The mistress had no place to hide from the backlash. Online critics lashed out at her for participating in the affair and enjoying the spoils of Richard's wealth, while Emily battled a life-threatening illness. Thus, the house of cards that Richard had built with arrogance and deceit finally toppled. With each revelation, the man who once had everything found himself reduced to a cautionary tale. Emily, though physically drained, felt the weight of relief settle over her. The final act was near. All that remained was to finalize her revenge, ensuring she walked away with dignity and security, while Richard was left with nothing but the consequences of his own actions. In the aftermath of Richard's downfall, Emily's life took on a measured calm she never thought possible. The pre-nuptial agreement's morality clause, combined with the damaging evidence of Richard's misconduct, ensured she received a substantial settlement, enough to cover her medical expenses, support her new artistic pursuits, and secure her future. Amelia Wallace masterfully negotiated the terms, emphasizing that any further public dispute would only prolong the company's suffering. Desperate to salvage whatever remained of Kensington Innovations, the board conceded to Emily's demands. During her final visit to the penthouse, now a husk of painful memories, Emily walked through each room, recalling the moments of joy and heartbreak. She paused in the grand living room where they had hosted countless parties, where she first discovered the faint scent of another woman's perfume. The memories flickered like scenes from a half-forgotten film. Instead of anguish, she felt an odd sense of closure. In a corner, she found a forgotten photograph of her and Richard, taken during a charity event. She studied it for a moment, remembering how genuinely happy they had been in that instant. She slipped it into her purse, not out of longing, but as a reminder of the lessons learned, of how easily love and loyalty could be corroded by greed and betrayal. Word of Emily's story spread, and media outlets lauded her courage for speaking openly about her illness and her tumultuous marriage. She had become, to her surprise, a figure of quiet inspiration, a woman who overcame personal and physical challenges, emerging stronger than before. Richard, on the other hand, was rarely seen. Stripped of his CEO title and abandoned by investors, he took a forced leave from New York. Rumor had it he was staying in a small apartment in Brooklyn, far from the opulence of his old life. Ava's interest in him had waned as soon as the money and influence evaporated. The few acquaintances who remained described him as withdrawn, consumed by bitterness. On a brisk autumn morning, Emily stood on the stage of a renovated downtown theater, rehearsing lines for a new production that Tristan was directing. The smell of wood, paint, and dusty curtains was comforting, reminiscent of her college days. After the final run-through, Tristan congratulated her on a powerful performance. They shared a warm smile, filled with the unspoken acknowledgement of how far she had come. Later, Emily visited Mount Sinai for a routine checkup. Dr. Serena Holmes gave her cautious but encouraging news. Her condition was stable, and the treatments appeared to be effective. Though she would need ongoing care, the immediate danger had passed. Outside the hospital, the crisp air felt cleaner, the sunlight brighter. She realized she was free from the toxic cycle of betrayal, free from the fear of losing herself. The next day, she took a quiet moment to reflect on her journey. She penned a letter, one she knew she would never send, to Richard. In it, she wrote of disappointment, love lost, and forgiveness she was still learning to offer. She ended with gratitude, oddly enough, for the lessons his betrayal had taught her. Then she folded the letter, locked it away in a drawer, and stepped out into the bustling New York streets. A new dawn had arrived for Emily Carter Kensington, one where she could define her own destiny. The empire Richard had built lay in ruins, but from the ashes, Emily reclaimed her life, proving beyond a doubt that even a broken heart can spark the fiercest flames of rebirth. And so ends the saga of Richard Kensington and Emily Carter, an unforgettable cautionary tale about greed, betrayal, and the indomitable spirit of a woman who refused to be destroyed by either. Emily's unwavering determination led her from heartache to healing, showcasing that no wealth, no social standing, and no affair can diminish the fierce power of self-respect and resilience. In the end, her revenge wasn't just about reclaiming what was hers. It was a testament to her inner strength, a reminder that love begins with honoring oneself. If this riveting story moved you and left you longing for more real-life drama, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Help spread the word about Emily's incredible journey, and make sure you're the first to hear about upcoming tales that reveal the triumphs and trials of our most compelling characters. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more unforgettable stories.